If you're able to continue to stand for the reading of the word, our scripture reading for today is found in 1 Thessalonians chapters 2, verses 1 through 12 and 19 through 20. You know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of our God, we dared to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition. For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. You know, we never used flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ we could have asserted our authority. Instead, we were like young children among you. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked day and night in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. But brothers and sisters, when we were orphaned by being separated from you for a short time, in person, not in thought, out of our intense longing, we made every effort to see you. We wanted to come to you, certainly I, Paul, did, again and again, but Satan blocked our way. For what is our hope, our joy, or the crown in which we glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and joy. This is the word of the Lord. Please be seated.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hope Church. My name is Drew. I'm one of the pastors here. It's a delight to be with you all on this holiday weekend. So whether you're new or you've been with us for a while, I just want to say welcome. This is actually a great Sunday to be here in that, we've been talking about these various themes over the last few weeks. And we've had this message series called Counterformed. Can I hear you say counterformed? That's right. Now, what does it mean to be counterformed? Well, we're talking about how so much of the world, the images in the world, the voices that exist, social media, there's all sorts of ways that we're being formed by the patterns of this world. What to value, what looks good, what's meaningful, what is the purpose of life. And today and in previous weeks, we've been talking about what does it mean for us to actually be a people who are counterformed, to be formed by a voice that's much different, but is more true and beautiful and good. And that's the voice of Jesus. What does it look like for us to be shaped into kind of his image, the fashion in which Jesus wants to shape us that might be so countercultural to the world. We talked about this value of spaciousness, for instance, or kind of living out of a belovedness, or being a people of blessing instead of cursing. And what does that look like for us to be people who are shaped by some of these values? Now, last week, Jeff preached this great message on people first, and today I'm going to add on top of that message. If you haven't heard it, go ahead and watch the stream that happened last week. Jeff did a remarkable job about how do we go from being people who can really be present with others. And today I'm actually going to add to it, especially around this similar passage that we read earlier. Now, this is a letter that was actually written from the Apostle Paul to the early church in Thessalonica, which was a city which was the capital of this area of Macedonia in the Roman Empire. Now, you got to understand, Christianity was like this small, nothing movement that they were starting in these little homes as people were talking about this no-name Jewish Messiah who rumors were that he was this miracle worker who also resurrected from the grave. Now here Paul comes as someone who had been steeped in the Jewish tradition, but also as a Roman citizen, who had been making a case for why Jesus was really the Messiah, the chosen one, and why everyone, whether you're Jewish or Gentile, should actually follow this Jesus person. Now you could imagine, to many, he sounded like a crazy person. Especially in the shadows of Rome, with all of its military strength and power, could you imagine? There's this guy who's talking about this other Jewish carpenter from Bethlehem who rose again from the dead. What are you talking about? And yet, Paul, who's so emboldened by the reality of the resurrection of Jesus, he's going and he's starting new churches all across the Roman Empire. And so there was this small church that ended up burgeoning up in Thessalonica, in this city. And so what Paul would do is he would write these letters to these various churches. And as he's writing these letters, he has different reasons for writing these letters to various churches. But in some, if you could imagine, as he's starting this movement of all these different house churches in these various cities, what he's doing is he's writing to encourage them. He's like, listen, hey, I know that people are telling you you're crazy. You don't know what you're doing. Who is this Jesus fellow? You might die for this. And yet, what Paul is writing, he's making a case for not only the work that he's doing, but he's also writing to encourage them. Now check out what Paul writes in this letter in 1 Thessalonians that was just read for us. Here's Paul. He writes, "You know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results." So in other words, he's talking about the results of like, hey, there's a mission to what we're doing. We want the news of Jesus to expand, to hopefully free people and liberate people into a new way of life. And notice what he writes. He says, "We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi." Now, that's not news to these folks. In fact, it was very common that the early Christians were persecuted because, again, how silly and ridiculous their faith sounded like, especially in following this Jesus person. Now, notice what it says, "As you know, but with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel." Gospel means good news, in the face of strong opposition. Again, he's alluding to the various kind of persecution that was happening to the early church. "For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you." It's not like we're trying to trick you into something. Listen, we're being persecuted for this. So you can see he's making a case, trying to encourage the Thessalonians here. "On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, the good news of Jesus. We're not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. You know, we never use flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from people. We weren't doing this to be popular." So, sorry, those are my words. "Not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. Instead, we were like young children among you." Now, notice, Paul's going to use a metaphor as he talks about his heart for the people of Thessalonica. He says, "Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a..." Now notice, he uses another metaphor. He used the metaphor of a nursing mother. Met a couple of moms today, 2 months old babies. Welcome, Shirley and Jane and the whole crew and moms. Just thinking of you. But look, it's also as a father deals with his own children. Encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. For what is our hope, our joy, or the crown in which we will glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and our joy." He says this about the people. You, your names, your faces, you're our glory and joy that I hold on to. Now, here's what's so interesting about what Paul is writing. A lot of people, when it comes to kind of just how they go about life in terms of what they value, oftentimes, even in today's business settings, we can often talk about 2 different ways or approaches to how we think about progress. One way is basically task-oriented, like let's just get the job done. And then there's also this other orientation that's really people-oriented. And oftentimes, these 2 things are pitted against each other. You're either going to be really task-oriented or you're really, really people-oriented. And the reality is, the Christian message is actually both of these things. It has a lot to do with mission, but it also has to do with people. And so even in the beginning of this passage, you can see Paul is writing. He's like, listen, he talks about the results of our coming to you. So he cares about results. He cares about progress. But more than progress, you can see as Paul is making his case to the early church, He's saying that in addition to progress, perhaps what is most important is actually this orientation towards people. That with God, people matter greatly. That's why he says at the end of this letter, he's saying, listen, the metaphor that I'm using is as a nursing mother who cares for her child, as a father who cares for his sons and daughters. That's the kind of disposition I have. You are our glory and our joy. You, your names, your faces, your stories, you people are who really matter to me. And so, yes, amen. There is this people orientation then to the way that Paul is talking about, this Christian disposition of what really matters in life. Now, if you know anything about the story of Hope Church, we first started our church in Astoria, Queens, and it was kind of with this vision that we would start new churches in different neighborhoods, and we thought that it'd be easier to connect in discipleship relationships if we started in different locations rather than growing into a big mega crowd. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up starting these new churches in these various areas. Hope Westside, Mike Park, he was, I don't know where he is now, but he was the founding pastor of this church community, and now he doesn't stay in service anymore. No, I'm just kidding. But Mike and Jeannie, they were the founding pastors of this church community in 2018. And so many of these churches were started. Now, as the founder of this kind of church that ended up spawning on different churches, I think one of my own struggles that existed was, as we're starting these new churches, I would basically invest in a few leaders, kind of train them, and then send them out with a group of people to start these different churches in different neighborhoods. So my wife and I, we were part of the Midtown Church, which was the third church. We handed off the initial church, which was in Astoria, Queens, which is still flourishing in Queens and doing a wonderful job. And so then my wife and I, we moved to Midtown, and then we started new churches, kind of raising them up, sent out a group of people. Now, one of the things that was super awkward for me as kind of the founder of this was it was really difficult for me to know how to interact with these pastors that I was leading. My family of origin, I'm the youngest of 4 boys. And if any of you guys are familiar with the Enneagram profile, Enneagram is a personality profile, and I'm a helper, which is a 2. So I'm not necessarily like the take charge kind of leader, like this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. Instead, I'm more of the youngest of 4 who's basically, hey, what do you need help with? How can I help you? And so as a result, like oftentimes as I'm leading other people and trying to invest in them, I felt really deeply insecure. And so in my moments of insecurity, I'd be like, man, I gotta level up my leadership. And so to level up my leadership, I gotta be like a CEO, Steve Jobs visionary type of guy, And so I would try to psych myself up to be like this directive leader, right? So I'd be in a group full of all these pastors, and I'd be like, guys, I think this is where we should go, and this is what we're doing, And then some of the pastors would be like, no, I actually disagree with you, Drew. I think we should be doing something different. And I'd be like, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for even mentioning that, And so I realized there was like this. But I get really insecure because there was this kind of one kind of extreme was like this CEO type leader that I felt like I needed to live into. And then I'd kind of react to that, and I'd be like, oh, you know what, I just need to be everyone's friend. Like, I just need to be cool with everyone. These are my friends, so I'm gonna just be friends with everyone. So that's kind of how I approached this. I was a friend, and I realized that kind of this disposition that I took as a friend, I ended up being a coward. I just had a hard time, talking to people and giving feedback and being afraid of saying things that might be difficult for people to hear. And as I was kind of looking for what do I live into? I realized there was, especially in the writings of Paul, there's this image of a spiritual father and a spiritual mother. And those of you who are parents in the room, or those of us who long to be parents in the room, the disposition of a parent. A disposition of parent, of course, is overflowing with love and care and concern, like a nursing mother. And yet there's also this disposition of, at the same time, I also want what's best for my kid when it comes to the ways in which I want to challenge them to be a better version of themselves. Now, parents in the room, you all know this, right? As a child grows, learning the difference between when to hug and when to use the hammer, right? Like both of those kinds of reality, hammer, sorry, maybe a little too harsh but anyhow. But you know what I mean, right? Like as a parent, there's this disposition, and there's a different mentality than simply just CEO leader and just, hey, I'm just your buddy kind of leader. There's actually this disposition that's overflowing with love and concern. When you truly love someone, and when you've been loved by someone, you know that there's this dynamic of both encouragement as well as a dynamic of being challenged in various ways. And it's so meaningful that the metaphor that Paul uses when he talks about his love for these people, he's like, I didn't come to you as like some CEO that you got to get results. We need you to meet your kind of key performance indicators. And he doesn't come to you like, hey, I'm just a pal. I'm just a pal of yours. He's like, I long for you. I pray for you. I care for you. I want you to be the best version of yourselves. And there's something so significant about how Paul's speaking with this metaphor, because people are first. People matter greatly when it comes to the grand scheme of things. Now, again, it's not like he's saying, oh, results don't matter. He's saying results matter, but only in light of this disposition where we care about people. Now, here's the thing. Paul, as Paul would actually write about this kind of metaphor, you see, he's simply continuing in the tradition that he had heard from Jesus and the apostles about the way and the manner in which this movement would spread. Now, who knew that this movement would spread worldwide so that today we're in this room, like, as a result of a group of people that would, one by one, they would actually care deeply about people's names, faces, and stories. Well, check out this passage in Luke chapter 6, in the gospel account. Look at what Jesus does. It says, one of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. Simon, whom he named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Now, I know that Jeff kind of hearkened to this kind of crazy community to bring together. But here's what I'd love to point out, especially in this passage. Did you know, like, it starts with, you know what Jesus did? He went to the mountainside. Went to a mountainside, and all night, he's just praying. Just pondering. Like, this is a monumental moment for him. Like, he knows that he's going to be deeply invested in a group of people, and he's just praying. And it's so easy to quickly go through this, but do you see like the kind of the heart, the passion, the intensity with which Jesus is giving so much attention? And then, of course, you read these names and you're just like, oh yeah, these 12 disciples, of course. But like, Jesus had such care and concern. Now, I know that in the genealogy sections of various scriptures, we might quickly pass over them. We're just like, oh, that list, whatever. Let's go read ahead to where the exciting parts are. But in the ancient world, these names meant so much, because these names encapsulate an entire story of generations, of people, and their own histories and their own backgrounds. And so this list, when Jesus is actually coming up with this list, it's not just some throwaway line in the gospel accounts. This is people who Jesus is actually deeply, intensely praying over. He cared deeply about these names. It wasn't just the crowd, it was these names. And he spends all night praying over them, pondering them, their names, their stories, their histories, their idiosyncrasies, their fears, their anxieties, their hopes. And isn't it crazy? Like, even in this list, at the end of the list, there's Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Even in the list, people who would read this years later would know that name, Judas Iscariot, as a traitor. But guess what? Jesus, even then, Jesus would be, all night, he'd be praying and thinking about even someone who would become a traitor and an enemy. And yet, his orientation towards people is so significant here. Now, some of us might know, like, oh yeah, Jesus, of course, didn't he feed the 5,000? Wasn't he leading massive crowds? And the reality is, yes. But the reality is that in the gospel account, there's 40 different scenes of Jesus who is actually interacting with a small group of people. In other words, Jesus was invested in the few the most, not the many. Now, of course, are there scenes where Jesus is preaching to a large crowd, feeding thousands of people? There's 17 accounts of that. And yet, what we see is that most of Jesus' life, his time and energy, was actually invested in the names of the few. He knew their stories, he knew their families, he knew their backgrounds. He wasn't about the crowds, he was about their names. Now, does it mean that none of us are supposed to lead massive movements and lead big crowds? No, for some of us, that may be your call and mine, but at the end of the day, it should never, that goal of crowds should never supersede our ability to know people, to see people, to know their stories, and to be invested in people first. Jesus spent most of his time with the few, not the many. And the same invitation is to all of us. What does it look like for us to be invested in the few, to know these names? Now, if you were to check out, even today when we think about the church and the mission of the church and kind of what might be important, oftentimes if we put up this graphic on the left here is modern day discipleship, and oftentimes churches kind of have this same kind of orientation. Let's just get a big crowd, and then slowly, like that crowd, like whoever's kind of gets really invested kind of in this funnel, then we can somehow change the world with a few of these folks. And notice, but Jesus' method, which is so significant, is he actually invests in the few. There's the three. There's even scriptural kind of examples of Jesus invested in 3, and then 12, and then 70, and then starting a movement that would actually change the world, that we today sit here because Jesus was people first in his orientation. He invested in the few. While, of course, yes, he did lead massive movements or crowds, but he was invested in the few. Now, this is why, as a church community, we harp week in and week out about various groups and courses and teams to get involved in. Because more than kind of listening to a person, how ironic this moment is, like we recognize that the power of what will happen in this community and beyond happens in this people-first orientation, where we know our names, our stories, where we can invest in one another, where we can love one another, and where we can challenge one another in godly ways. Now, I recognize, like, some people, like, they might feel like, this is overwhelming, Drew. I can't believe you're telling people first. Well, I don't even know what you're talking about here. Like, do you mean I have to change my personality if I generally don't like talking to strangers and whatnot? Well, let me say this. Okay, so being people first does not mean the following, okay? It does not mean I have to be an extrovert. Introverts, can you raise your hand? No, I'm just kidding. Don't raise your hand. You probably that was mean. That was mean. Sorry. Although Brett says just high five each other, so you guys, no shame. Yes. Listen, it doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. It doesn't mean you have to like everyone. Some of you are like, hallelujah. Doesn't mean you have to be friends with everyone. It's impossible. You can't be friends with everyone. Only Jeff can. Doesn't mean you have to be friendly with everyone, right? Because there's limits to our own humanity. Even Jesus, there were times he would steal. He wasn't friendly with everyone. Doesn't mean I have to forfeit being results-oriented. Doesn't mean that I have to kind of give up caring about results and mission. Just means I need to constantly keep at the forefront, especially in a town like this, which is so results-oriented. Just means that people need to matter. And it doesn't mean everyone has to like me either. Not everyone liked Jesus. It just means that we never lose sight of the fact that people, their stories, their names, their presence really matters. And that our orientation, as much as we care about results, that we care deeply about names of people, their faces, their stories, their histories, and so on. You know, in preparation for this, I was reading, there was some research was done, a survey was done of someone who worked in kind of hospice care. And she was reflecting on kind of like, what are the things that people say the most on their deathbed about the regrets that they carry? And one of the most significant regrets was people would say, I wish I worked more. I'm just kidding, they didn't say that. Some of you are like, really? Maybe New Yorkers said that. No, but I mean, no, it was actually the exact opposite. It was, I wish I didn't work as much so that I could spend time with the people who were most meaningful to me. Now, isn't that interesting? Intuitively, we all know this. Like, intuitively, we know, yeah, of course, relationships matter, people matter. But what does it look like if there was an audit or kind of like, just an audit was done on our time, money, energy, like the way that our imaginations were shaped? How many of us, when it comes down to where our time, energy, money is spent, what does it look like for us to be people first? Now, I recognize some of you are like, some of you, especially those with young kids right now, you're like, listen, Drew, you're challenging me to be people first. It's hard enough, like caring for these little ones, like I get it. And being people first means that, that becomes, your family becomes part of that few that end up, hopefully, taking up most of your imagination in this season of your life. And even for others who maybe you're here and you're without family here, but you're here and you're making friendships, like more than simply being about crowds, what does it look like to have the few and to invest in those few relationships? And I recognize different folks of us are in different seasons and different places and stages of life. Well, here's a phrase that Andy Stanley used and that we've used a lot as our church community. It's this: do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. You don't have to be Mr. or Mrs. Extrovert for everyone. Again, Jeff can do that. Sorry, Jeff. Jeff, getting a lot of strays here. I don't know what happened, Jeff. But anyhow, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. What does it look like for us to have the few and then to invest in those few? And again, our groups, courses, and teams, the way our church functions, it's more important. Or just as important as Sundays are, it's just as important. And honestly, even more important to actually be involved in relationship. So more than simply a crowd, what does it look like to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone? Now, some of you are aware of Do For One, the organization. It's an organization that Jane actually helps lead, a phenomenal organization that actually is based on this quote, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. It's an organization that matches people with physical and mental handicaps with people who don't, and who in lateral friendships, where people can just invest in these various friendships in this significant way of building a community together to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. It's a beautiful vision. And in many ways, that's the vision that we're talking about. Yeah, we don't have to lead mass movements, but do you see the way that mass movements start is when we can begin to invest in the few. This past week, as a church staff team, we got together and we actually had a list out of Westside, Hope Westside. And we spent time praying over the names of people in this room, each of your names. Except if you're new, sorry, just welcome. We didn't pray for you, but welcome. Give us your name. We'll pray for you. Prayed over your names, your stories. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Now, David Benner, a spiritual writer as well as a psychologist, he actually has this beautiful book called Soulful Spirituality. And he writes a lot on presence, like the presence being one in terms of prayer and our presence with God, as well as being present with one another. And in his book, he talks about these 3 diagnostic questions just to ask about the way that we show up in relationships with people. To kind of like, again, take another inventory of whether or not, how are we showing up with people? And here's the first question he asks. Number 1, am I fully present or am I distracted? What a question. When it comes to if we're people first, when I show up in my relationship, am I fully present or am I distracted? Now, if you've tried greeting me at the before or after, I got to work on this, okay? Because I can get so distracted. I want to say hi to everyone. Again, extroverted in spirit. Want to meet everyone. Want to meet every new person. Listen. So I recognize this question is a diagnostic for me. Am I fully present or am I distracted? When I'm with people, do they experience me as being with them? Or am I constantly bombarded with all sorts of noise and glued to my device and whatever else it might be? A couple weeks ago, we actually launched one of our core discipleship courses is Emotionally Healthy Relationships. And in this relationships course, we basically are talking about how to have a vision, like a Christian vision for how we do relationships with one another. And so much of the course is on like being present with people and using skills that we might cultivate healthy relationships as singles, as couples, as parents, whatever it might be. How do we be present with one another? So you got to understand. So like we had our leaders meeting at 7 o'clock p.m. And my wife and I, we were basically, she was going to lead a group. I'm leading a group as well. So we're getting ready. So many of you are in that course with Jeff. And so we're getting ready for this. We finished dinner. It's like 6:40 p.m. And Tina, my wife, comes up to me and she's basically like, hey, can I tell you what happened at the new parent reception today? And I was like, I really don't care. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. But of course, because I'm in the mode of like emotionally healthy relationships right now, I'm basically like, yeah, honey, let's talk about that. So we sit down, we talk, and then she goes, you know, when we first got married, and we kind of had this dream of doing this and this, and talking about this and this, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we're going way back to when we got married. All right, you know. So she's talking to me, and then like. Finally, and you know, I'm kind of anxious because we got this emotionally healthy relationships course going on, and I'm kind of leading. I'm thinking of illustrations. So finally, like she's talking like about all this stuff, and I said, Tina, I'm like, just spit it out. What's your point? Just what's your point? And she goes, fine. I'm not going to talk to you. So she leaves. I'm like, good. I got to go lead this course on how to be present with people, and. I mean, gosh, what a moment. Like, listen, here I am, leading this course, emotionally healthy relationships, being present with people. And here was this moment where I couldn't just say, hey, Tina, now's not a good time to talk. Maybe we could talk later. But like, as I was thinking about this whole idea of people-oriented, being people-oriented, and even looking at this diagnostic, am I fully present or am I distracted? I realized, listen, I've got a long way to go. But isn't it amazing how Jesus, he's so present with people. He treats every miracle different, every healing so uniquely. Number 2, am I loving or judging? High five your neighbor and say, am I loving or judging? Don't answer each other. Maybe right now is not the time for that. But what a question, right? Am I loving or judging? You know, the way that people experience me, do they experience me as a loving presence or a judging, cynical presence? What a question for us, especially as New Yorkers. And here's the third question. Am I open or closed to being changed? High five your neighbor. Say, am I open or closed to being changed? What a question. Now, I recognize some of us, we're like, oh my goodness, that question there, like, what if you lose your conviction? What if you, if you really are open to being changed and you can easily compromise? Well, listen, relax. This is simply a question about that gets at our presence as curious people who can actually engage in conversations without wanting to change or fix people. Now, isn't it amazing? Jesus interacted with all sorts of people that he disagreed with, had a different lifestyle than, and yet each person felt so loved and safe with him. And these questions are questions just to ask. Maybe in your marriage, maybe in your friendships, maybe in your relationship, maybe in our small groups, to ask these 3 questions when it comes to our people orientation. Are these questions, how do they diagnose the way that we show up as a community, in our workplaces, in our church? Are we a people who are fully present, loving, and have an openness to us, kind of an invitational spirit about us? Now, have you ever noticed, you know what's interesting is in the Great Commandment, when Jesus would teach on the Great Commandment, like for instance in Matthew 22 in the Gospel account, he would basically say this. He'd say, love others. This was the second part of the Great Commandment. He'd say, love others as you love yourself. Now, in other words, he presupposes, he's saying the only way that you can actually have a capacity to truly love someone is if you yourself, you love yourself. If you have a capacity, if you're so secure in yourself. Because otherwise, if you're living out of your own insecurity, if you're living out of your own deficits to the way that you treat yourself, that ends up spilling out to the way that you care or treat other people. And so the only way to love others is actually to love yourself. Now, isn't that interesting? It assumes self-love, that we actually care deeply about ourselves first. I remember actually counseling this one married couple, and this one spouse, I'll never forget, she said to me, she said, listen, if my husband is going to treat me the way that he treats himself, I don't want it. And I was like, why? And then she said, he is so hard on himself. He's so harsh. He doesn't take care of himself. And gosh, if she's gonna love me, if he's gonna love me like that, I don't want it. And I looked over at him and he was like, well, yeah, like, I'm kind of harsh on myself. See, and this is where the Christian faith is so different and unique. You see, because the Christian faith is a faith that finds our truest sense of security and lovability and our truest sense of wholeness and identity. Not from other people, not from kind of our own kind of inner strength, but from a God who actually loves us, forgives us, and cares for us. You know, it's interesting, right? Because Paul used this image. He talks about a nursing mother cares for a child. And he talks about this father who cares. And he says, you are our pride and our joy. And, you know, as he says that, right, he doesn't say, my 401k is my pride and joy. The number of assets that we've accumulated, my LinkedIn profile, that is my pride and my joy. He says, no. He says, you, people, you are my pride and my joy. And his capacity to love, this whole imagery is actually this father and a mother who cares. It actually echoes this other image that God would present to his people about the kind of love that God actually has for us. Look at what it says in Isaiah chapter 49. Notice, the prophet is describing the heart of God for his people. And Isaiah says, can a mother forget the baby at her breast? That's a rhetorical question. Of course not. Of course, a mother, a nursing mother, could never forget and have no compassion on the child she has born. Even though she might forget, as impossible as that sounds for a nursing mother to forget a baby and want to protect with compassion and love for your child. Look at what God says. I will not forget you. I've engraved you on the palms of my hands. What an image. God's like, gosh, like a nursing mother, like think about how much a nursing mother cares for the well-being of a child. There's no way she can forget. But even though she might forget, I just want you to know, the love of God, the interior gaze that God has over you and I, the way that he knows you, knows your story, knows your heart, knows your prayer requests, knows everything about you, he's not going to forget you. And then he says, I've got you engraved on the palms of my hands. I remember a young person was asking me about tattoos and what I thought about them. And I was just asking about what kind of tattoos they were thinking of getting. And they were talking about kind of these people that were meaningful for those. And then they were talking about like having these names tattooed on their, on their body. And, I was just like, oh, wow. I was like, you might want to think about those names though, right? Because some of those relationships, they might not make it, I don't know. Just might want to be really sure. Like when it comes to names, so as we're talking about this reality, I was just talking about, I was just thinking, God, without hesitation, he engraves your name on the palm of his hand. Like he knows your story, everything you've been, he engraves it. If you wondered whether God has ever forgotten you, listen, he's got it engraved on the palm of his hand. You know when you write something on your hand to remember, to not forget? He's got your name engraved. He's not going to forget you. And this is why he sent Jesus to die for you. So that you might find your truest lovability and security in a God who would die for you. So that you might know this God who knows your name, knows your story, and will not forget your name, doesn't forget, isn't dismissive of your own kind of life, your history, the things that you're carrying into this room today. Like the only way that we can have a people orientation is when we have first met this God who has loved us from the start, who knows your name, knows your story, knows every prayer, knows every longing, knows every hurt, knows your past, and says, you, willing to die for you because I love